everybody, it's your friendly digital technology librarian, Christy here. We've reached another Friday, so of course I have another Film Rec Friday ready for everybody out there. Now, with Steven Spielberg's recent adaptation of West Side Story bringing home the big Best Picture in a musical or comedy category at the Golden Globe Awards this last weekend, I thought now would kind of be the perfect time to put together a rec list for some of the best musicals available on our free video services out there. So this is the perfect week to tune in if you happen to be a musical theater fan. I know I'm a huge one, and I'm always looking for recommendations for either actual musicals on film or films that sort of have something to do with musical theater. So yeah, this week we are all about that. As always, these recs are available entirely for free with the use of your Milan-Berlin library card, and they can be found on one of our 3 video services, which are CleveNet's Overdrive, Hoopla Digital, and Canopy. So without any further ado, let's bring up the curtain on our handful of musical theater film adaptation recommendations. Okay, we are going to kick things off with a selection from CleveNet's Overdrive, and that is for the 2017 film Stuck. Now, Stuck is one of those pop musicals that really flew under the radar when it came out. I have only ever really peripherally heard of this story at all from like friends who are hardcore musical fans, but I really, really enjoyed watching it. It is a film about small things. So in this story, 6 New Yorkers end up getting stuck on a subway train together for the day, and they are essentially trapped dealing with one another's large and small issues, and it gets pretty intense pretty quickly. But that's sort of the nature of this kind of storytelling, like how stories interweave together and how we find connection and need connection. It's very definitely steeped in current topics and the hot button topics. It's very racially charged. And I was very impressed with the cast in particular. If you follow actors very much, you'll probably recognize quite a few of the faces. So Giancarlo Esposito is in this. He has an excellent voice. Like, I've never heard him sing. I'm a huge fan from like his roles in Spike Lee movies. I watched him in The Mandalorian, but I have never heard him sing. So I was really kind of surprised. I figured he'd just be, like a name actor that they throw into the cast. But no, he was really solid. And then the performance itself was really, really phenomenal. Like, his character is a homeless man who essentially lives on this train. Like, a huge portion of his life is lived in this train. And, it deals with his story, deals a lot with the perception of the outside world. Like, what does it mean to be homeless? There's some pretty powerful moments in there. Amy Madigan is in this, does an exceptional job. You have like Arden Cho from Teen Wolf fame. She's in this. Also a solid voice, not like a crazy phenomenal singing voice, but serviceable, especially for the role that she's playing, and definitely like an emotionally charged character. I mean, again, this is one of those musicals that's definitely an issue storyline, and you're dealing with race in here. You're dealing with domestic violence. You are dealing with immigration. You are dealing with stereotypes of all kinds, grief. I mean, it just packs on the emotional drama, but somehow it still works. I mean, that's a huge portion of this story, is how all of these things that are happening to all of these people could happen to anyone. And that's sort of how it pulls you in. You could be any of these people, and it doesn't really matter. Like, you're out the outside shell, like any of these emotional issues that they are going through. It could be any one of us. And I really, really appreciated that. The music itself is definitely serviceable. It's a pop musical. So if you're expecting like the big, broad, sweeping classic musical style singing, that's not what you get here. But you do get some really, really catchy tunes and some really emotional songs as well. Ashanti is in this, and she puts in a really phenomenal vocal performance. I mean, like, I'm a fan musically in general, but I loved what she did with her role. Um, and again, whether or not these actors are normally known for their singing, like Ashanti, or a young man who's very clearly a stage actor normally, like, that's their bread and butter, to be able to emote through music. But then some of these actors who are definitely primarily spoken word performers really put in fantastic performances that I think are maybe almost more charged than those who are used to working with music. So if you are looking for something that definitely plays with like messaging, that is not afraid, that does not shy away from complicated topics, that also has like catchy tunes, really, really solid performances, check out Stuck. I mean, it's a quick musical, so you know you're not trapped for hours and hours. It's entertaining. It's really well filmed, and I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great little find, and I would certainly listen to the soundtrack again. So again, available on CleveNet's Overdrive, Stuck from 2017, definitely on my recommended list. Okay, our next recommendation is one that I could not include when I was already doing a rec list prompted by the new Steven Spielberg West Side Story adaptation. So, of course, what I'm referring to is the classic 1961 adaptation of West Side Story from Jerome Robbins and Robert Wise. This is one of those musicals that is both iconic and quite controversial. It is definitely a production of its time, but I still think totally worth watching, if for no other reason than for Rita Moreno's performance as Anita. She is unbelievable. You know, no matter what else you might think about this particular production, she is this shining beacon of awesome. And like I said, you absolutely have to watch it if for no other reason than her performance. Now, for anyone who's not particularly familiar with West Side Story, it is a racially charged singing and dancing Romeo and Juliet. Even if you hate Shakespeare, even if you hate Shakespeare's particular Romeo and Juliet, which is one of the categories I fall under, I love Shakespeare, hate Romeo and Juliet, I still love West Side Story. There's something about this particular iteration of the story that really, really works for me. I think that sort of exceptionally emotionally charged storyline is better served by a vehicle that already sort of requires suspension of disbelief, like singing and dancing. Very few people like just randomly sing and dance. I mean, I know I sometimes do that in my house, but generally not, you know, in the middle of a grocery store or whatever. Anyway, I think that sort of heightened emotional state that comes with this kind of musical works really well with this particular storyline. So again, if you're not a Shakespeare fan, if you are not a Romeo and Juliet fan in particular, this still is a very, very worthwhile film. You have exceptional dance sequences in this from Robbins. Like, there are few people I think who were as amazing at putting like highly synchronized, incredibly intricate dance sequences together. Like, he just turns them into this magical transformative moment, and this film is full of that. I mean, so many sequences. Like, I am not a dancer. I have never been a dancer. I absolutely love so many moments from this. I can recall scenes, and it's been years since I watched this originally. You also have some really, really solid musical performances. Again, Rita Moreno is ridiculously awesome in this. The woman who sings for Natalie Wood, who is your main character of Maria, she is incredible. She also did the voice for Audrey Hepburn in My Fair Lady. She was one of the nuns in Sound of Music. I mean, it's a voice that we have probably all heard. But yeah, she does the singing for Natalie Wood and is incredible in the roles that in the songs that she does perform. Natalie Wood, albeit a lip synced performance, still puts in a huge amount of acting. And she's really, really great with the guy that they cast for Tony. I mean, the acting in this is really wonderful. Like the acting is in no question whatsoever. Some of the other controversy comes in with the odd choices of casting. Um, so you have one faction of performers who are supposed to be predominantly white, and one faction that's supposed to be predominantly Puerto Rican. This is the 1960s. Remember, you had a lot of charged casting decisions being made anyway. I mean, this was an era when it was perfectly fine for movie studios to cast Marlon Brando as a Japanese man and to literally tape his eyes back and put him in yellowface. So, you know, racial sensitivity wasn't a big thing, or at least it wasn't presented as such. You have people like Natalie Wood playing very specifically coded characters. So that has always been a hot button topic with this particular musical. But again, Rita Moreno, watch it for her. Seriously though, I will just go through and watch her scenes. I mean, there have definitely been moments when I've just like gone through and watched her singing and dancing. She's just amazing in this. So I still think the 1961 adaptation of West Side Story, despite all of the controversy and questionable choices, is 100% worth watching. If only to sort of compare it to, you know, what a today's casting director would do, what today's visual aesthetic would compare to. I mean, that's one of the things that's really, really cool about having two musicals that are exactly the same but entirely different at the same time. So yes, please, please, please check out 1961's West Side Story. Again, available on Hoopla Digital and Canopy. Certainly worth a watch, both from an academic standpoint and simply from an entertainment standpoint. Highly recommended. Moving right along with another recommendation from Hoopla Digital. This one is for the 2007 film Across the Universe. This movie is a love letter to the Beatles and to every Beatles fan out there ever. I adore this movie. I've seen it many, many times. I've had it on in the background just so I could listen to the music. Across the Universe is a love story that spans many, many years and manages to interweave Beatles music into every single character's storyline. Considering some of the Beatles songs are kind of weird and out there, actually some of my favorite Beatles songs are pretty weird and out there, I'm amazed at how well everything melds together because it's not disjointed at all. I oftentimes find musical reviews and things like that to be sort of choppy. You know, it doesn't feel organic. The story feels really like horned in, but this is not that. This feels and flows like any other musical where the songs were originally written for those characters to live and breathe and sing and dance. Like it's just amazing. Julie Taymor is the director of this, and it shows 100%. I mean, she just has such a specific eye for color and shape and movement and everything that I've seen her do, whether it's the terrifyingly beautiful Titus Andronicus adaptation that she did several years back, or the staged Lion King musical. It all feels and screams of Julie Taymor. And this movie is no different. You get that right away. Like, again, visually stunning, stunning film. In it, you have this young British man played by Jim Sturgis. His name is Jude. That's not going to come back, right? He ends up traveling to the US to sort of search for his father and you just lead his own life, and ends up meeting this young, wealthy, sort of aimless young man played by Joe Anderson, whose character's name is Max. Um, Max takes Jude home with him for a weekend, and Jude ends up meeting Max's sister, Lucy. Again, that's not going to come back. Lucy is played by Evan Rachel Wood, who is stunning in this movie. Like, her voice is so beautiful. I'm always surprised by how incredibly well she sings, because I've seen her in tons of films and she was not singing in any of them. You know, if you're a fan of any of her other work, you wouldn't necessarily be like, that's a musical theater actress, but she fits in so well. Like, her voice just emotes perfectly and is also just beautiful to listen to. Anyway, so these three characters all have such intense lives and intense intentions, and that you see at every single scene. Like, Max is sort of aimless, but there's so much going on beneath the surface, and so many of the Beatles songs work so well for him, whether or not he's singing them or he's being sung about. Like, that's what's so amazing to me. Again, these songs were not written obviously for this musical, but it feels like they were. And I do think that that's a huge nod to the skill of Taymor's direction and the acting, especially of the three leads. You also have several secondary characters that are just as vital to the storyline as those three main performers. One in particular, I don't want to give anything away because her storyline sort of came out of nowhere for me, and I just fell in love with the character. But she sings songs like I Want to Hold Your Hand and Dear Prudence. Well, she's being sung about in Dear Prudence. Anyway, I love that character. So there are plenty of secondary characters that you can absolutely latch on to as well, in addition to being super invested in those three main people of Jude, Lucy, and Max. You know, if you enjoy Beatles music and you don't mind different iterations of those songs, because some people are purists, and if it's a Beatles song, they only want to hear the Beatles singing it, and I totally get that, totally respect it. But if you can let that go and just appreciate the songs and what they're saying, please check out Across the Universe. I adore this movie. I think it's beautifully done. I think the singing is gorgeous. I think the acting is also exceptional, and the direction is just impeccable. So again, Across the Universe, available on Hoopla, must watch. Moving right along to our Canopy recommendations. This first one is for the 2019 film Fiddler, A Miracle of Miracles. Now, this film is not actually a musical, but rather a documentary about the stage and film adaptation of Fiddler on the Roof. I absolutely adored this documentary. I didn't know anything about it prior to, but now I absolutely loved it. It also makes me want to rewatch the filmed production of Fiddler on the Roof, and definitely go see another stage production of it. So the original Broadway production of Fiddler on the Roof opened in 1964 and explored themes of tradition, religion, anti-Semitism, and history. And somehow it has managed to speak to audiences across the globe, regardless of their connection to those specific themes. You see incredible productions of Fiddler on the Roof in East Asia. You see it in throughout Europe, here in the States, and what this documentary explores is how these different cultures with such different backgrounds, different religions, still manage to make connection with this particular storyline, and how it's transformative, how it makes you feel regardless of your own religious backgrounds or your familiarity with Judaism, it's still a story that speaks to many, many people. It interviews people from the original Broadway cast, and some of those are hilarious because when you think about it, they bring up the point that, like, who thought it was a good idea to put this really kind of niche historical story about Judaism and anti Semitism on stage thinking it would be a massive hit, except it totally was. And how some of the Broadway actors were like, I'm going to be out of work and no one is ever going to hire me again, and how they've gone on to have massive, massive careers throughout the last several decades. And what it was that they all thought spoke to people. At the heart of this story is a family and the bonds between these family members. It's, yes, got this huge backdrop of, radical social change and Judaism and anti Semitism, but it also just speaks to those bonds, like how a father takes care of his daughters, how a mother takes care of her daughters, how these sisters relate to one another, how first love feels, how a begrudging first love will feel. It still tells stories about people that you can connect to no matter what. And the more interviews you watch, the more that comes across. Um, whether we're talking about that original Broadway cast that still to this day is shocked how well the story has done over the years, or you're talking to other Broadway performers who were hugely influenced by this play, regardless of the fact that, hey, they have nothing to do with any of its themes. Like, there's some interviews with Lin-Manuel Miranda who talks about the fact that, like, he has no familiarity with most of these classic traditions that this play goes through, but it's still, the first time he saw it, just caught him, spoke to him about things that he found relatable, again, regardless of his actual knowledge of any of these topics. And I think that's really what makes the original play storyline so amazing. Like, again, I am not Jewish or particularly traditional, but I love the movie adaptation. I've only seen the production a couple of times, and those were for really small stage productions of it. But, like, I still watch the movie adaptation of it every so many years, and I still love it every single time. Something about the music, the dancing, and again, that story between those family members. It's just transformative and beautiful. And this documentary really sort of delves into why that is. And I just find it absolutely fascinating. So if you like history, if you're not really even a musical theater fan, but you're interested in history, you're interested in topics like this, check out Fiddler, A Miracle of Miracles. It is a fascinating documentary, and it is highly entertaining. It is one of the more fun documentaries I've watched in a while, just because the people they interview are so effusive and so tickled by the love that this production they are part of gets to this day. So again, available on Canopy, Fiddler, A Miracle of Miracles. Watch it, you won't regret it. It's actually going to be my pick of the week. I adored this particular film. Okay, my final recommendation for this week is another title available on Canopy, and it's for the 1985 film adaptation of A Chorus Line. Full disclosure, when I was a kid, I hated this movie. Like, hated it. Absolutely nothing about it spoke to me. It was just one of those that I knew my mom had watched, and I was just like, this is so boring. That said, fast forward several years, I think I was in my mid-20s when I rewatched it, and I absolutely adored it. I think it's one of those where you just have to be at a certain point in your life to really recognize how amazing the story is. So in A Chorus Line, you're following this group of dancers as they vie for a very limited number of spots in a chorus line. And peppered throughout this particular musical are some ridiculous songs and some even more incredible dance sequences. I mean, there are some unbelievable sequences during the initial audition process where it's just this open cattle call, and you've got dozens and dozens and dozens of ridiculously talented dancers, and they're just weeding through them. The powers that be are just, rejection, 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 one acceptance out of like a half a dozen people who you would think would be amazing in any particular chorus role. And it just, the pacing, that's what really catches you right away. Like how a dream can be thrown out the window within 30 seconds, and it's utterly demoralizing, but also like keeps you on the edge of your seat. So yeah, that the beginning sequences are so gripping to me now, again, as an adult, where you see like dreams being dashed left and right. And it really is like quite impactful because of the almost callous nature of the audition process. Open cattle calls are like that. Like, you've got 30 seconds to catch somebody's eye, and if you can't do that, you're out. And it does a phenomenal job of putting that on screen, of making that sort of visceral pain visually available right away. So you've got like the first 15 minutes of this movie is nothing but that nonstop. It just keeps going. And all the while you've got incredible choreography going on. So you get caught up in how amazing the choreography is, and then the emotions of like rejection and it's just, it is a whirlwind. That first 15 minutes is just crazy. And after you get past that, you really start to delve into that small core group of characters that we follow throughout the rest of the film. You find out who they are as individuals, not just as dancers, but like the struggles they're going through. Like, some of them have been in musical productions and successful productions at that in the past, but that's no guarantee as a chorus member that anyone's going to remember you. It's this constant struggle to continue to get work. And I think that's relatable in a lot of fields where you feel like you're constantly slogging through and you're never getting anywhere. And that's part of what is so gripping about this story, that pulls you in right away. You've got a couple of weird stunt casting choices, like Michael Douglas plays the primary choreographer, who's the one who's making all these big decisions, like who stays and who goes. And he's not someone that I would think of as a choreographer, but he does a great job in his role, as you would expect. My favorite piece of casting, though, is one of my favorite stage actors, Terrence Mann, phenomenal voice, plays a non-singing role in this. And so I was like, why are you not singing? But it's interesting to see that sort of happen, where you have people who are really, really famous in the Broadway circle getting these small, albeit pivotal roles in screen. But yeah, you've got, besides just having exceptional dance sequences, which you would expect in a movie that follows chorus line dancers, you also have a number of really, really good just songs. You've a couple that are really iconic. One in particular that is whose title is "Not Safe for Work" is amazing. Like, it's one of those songs that you will be humming for hours afterward. But you wouldn't, or at least I would not expect to find that in a film adaptation of a play that's primarily about dancing. You've got some really, really iconic ballads, "What I Did for Love," songs like that. It's at the ballet. I mean, it produced so many songs that are part of the Broadway lexicon now. So, if you like films that are as much about small stories as they are about like big productions in equal parts, because that's what this is, like huge production, huge musical, big dances, teeny tiny stories about individual lives as well. Make sure you check it out. It again, while I could not get into it as a kid, as an adult, it really, really speaks to me. And I think there's certainly a place for that kind of musical, one that, you don't bring the kids to. You absolutely don't. But as a grown-up, unbelievably relatable, no matter what form of career you are in, what path you're on. So again, Chorus Line, available on Canopy, total must watch. Okay, so we've come to the end of my rec list for this week. If you have any of your own recommendations for movie musicals that we should totally be watching that I didn't get to mention, and there are a ton that I did not mention that are available on our video services, please, please, please comment, put them below. I adore musicals. I'm always looking for a new one to watch. I'm also looking for topics that you might want us to cover in the future. So if you have a topic or theme that you'd like us to look into, comment with that as well. As always, thank you, thank you, thank you for joining us today. I love being able to put these lists together. I have so much fun while I do them. And I hope you are having fun at home as well. So again, thank you so much for tuning in this week. And with that, I'm going to put this episode to bed. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.